Whatever I got. This is called Drop Forge. That old drop forge down on Main Street used to be the heartbeat of this town. People tell me they could hear it way up top of Duke Street, but men were working, so they didn't mind the sound. My dad was in the wheel and axle. The old forge shaped the billets for their trucks. The parts were interference fit to 90 tons or more. That press was awesome. I bet it cost $1 million. They mined the coal out there in Westville. Eureka dug the ore. They built a little furnace up the river at Verona. Hitler invaded Poland and the whole world went to war. That old drop forge down on Main Street, the people fell asleep to every night. It beat a different rhythm for the warriors. The women made munitions, the men went off to fight. Someone up in Ottawa signed a trade agreement, and no one heard the writing on the wall. Then they went and transferred all them jobs down to Mexico, and our young folk pack and leave here every fall. But that old drop forge down on Main Street, it used to be the heartbeat of this town. People tell me that they couldn't fall asleep for weeks after they shut the old forge down. That old drop forge down on Main Street. That old drop forge down on Main Street. That old drop forge down on Main Street. Thank you. There was a racially motivated incident in the town of New Glasgow, where I'm from. It happened in 1946, and it involved a lady by the name of Viola Desmond. Viola grew up in Halifax. She wanted to become a hairdresser, and she was of African Canadian heritage. She tried to get educated as a hairdresser in Canada. There wasn't a school that would take her, so she went to New York, and she took her hairdressing course there. She came back and she started a salon. She was quite successful, and she ended up selling a list of hair care products throughout the province of Nova Scotia. She traveled from Halifax to Sydney. And anyway, 1 week during this road trip of hers, she was in the town of New Glasgow where cars started acting up, and I'm not sure what the particular part was, but say a cracked distributor cap. She goes into the garage and the guy tells her, "You need a part. That's why your car is acting funny. You're stuck here for the night." So she grabbed a meal. She went to go to a show at the local theater. And she was unaware of a segregation policy that was in effect in the town at the time. And in 1946. And she was expected to sit in the balcony. But when she got to the admissions booth and asked, what's the cost of the show, they told her it was 5 cents. So she paid her nickel. She went in and sat on the main floor. And pretty soon the usher came down and, "No, you're not supposed to be sitting here. You should be in the balcony." And she said, "Well, I'm a little bit leery of heights. I kind of want to sit on the main floor." And he said, "Well, actually, these seats here cost a penny more." So she went back out to the admission booth, offered them the penny. And then when they wouldn't take it, she started to figure out what was going on. So at that point, she decided she was going to make a stand. And she was 9 years before Rosa Parks did the same thing in the States. And Rosa Parks, as we all know, became an international celebrity as a result of doing that. But what happened in Viola's case She went back in, she took the seat. The manager came down and tried to convince her to leave. She refused him. He went and got the town cop, and they literally ended up physically picking her up, dragging her out of her seat where she caught her ankle on one of the old wrought iron seats and suffered an injury there. They locked her up overnight in the local jail, called a doctor in to bandage her ankle up. The next morning she was hauled into a local court and she was fined $20 for tax evasion because they called the penny difference a luxury tax to sit on the main floor. So by the time she got back to Halifax and started telling her family and friends about that, they were naturally incensed by the whole issue, and they collected some money, they hired a lawyer, and they fought it all the way to the Nova Scotia Supreme Court. And she lost, because at that particular time, if you were the wrong color in Nova Scotia, you were expected not to make waves. So it devastated her. She became depressed. Her business suffered. Before too long, the business closed down. She moved to Montreal, and she died in 1965, and her family has fought that issue ever since then. And I came across it shortly after I retired from working up here and moved home. And it was a fairly prevalent story in the paper at the time, because the guy that was running for the local NDP leadership made a campaign promise that he would give her a pardon and an apology if he was elected. Subsequently, he was, but one of the things that surfaced at the time, there was a man in New Glasgow who was a kid at the time, and he was in the theatre that night and witnessed the incident. And he's an elderly fellow today, and he contacted the Halifax Chronicle Herald, and a reporter went down and interviewed him, and I saw the piece on the front page of the Chronicle Herald, and he made a statement in there saying, "I don't recall what was on the screen that night, but I'll never forget what happened across the aisle." So it was through his eyes that I finally was able to break into this and do that story. So this is for Viola. I remember the lights on the marquee. I recall that my brother came with me. It comes back to me how hard the old seat felt, and my nose still knows how good the popcorn smelled. I watched her as she sat across the aisle. The second time I looked her way, she turned and smiled. I was thinking that she had a pretty face, yet knowing she looked different in some ways. The usher was the first one down the aisle. As he talked to her, I watched her lose her smile. And then came the suit and the uniform, and I'm sure I asked my brother what was wrong. We've come so far since then. Those are days we might never see again. But there's more of the same. I don't think things have really changed. Watched them as they pulled her from her chair. She banged her ankle, but no one seemed to care. I heard later that she spent the night in jail, cold and lonely with those drunks in the next cell. Tax evasion read the charge upon the sheet. Something about an extra penny for her seat. She paid the fine, although she knew it wasn't right, to a small-town judge who saw it in black and white. We've come so far since then. Those are days we might never see again. But there's more of the same. I don't think things have really changed. I'm an old man, not a boy of 9 or 10, and I think about her a lot since then. Though I don't recall what we had gone to see, the detail that comes back surprises me. No, I don't recall what we had gone to see, but Viola smiles back at me. Yes, Viola smiles back at me.